Hi everyone, once again. My name is Jools Walker. I'm also known as LadyVelo in the cycling community. And welcome to Fora Restore21, the Power of Wellness community discussion that we're going to be having this evening. Now, this is all part of a 10-day festival that's being brought to life by leading personalities and experts in contemporary culture who are sharing their wellness formulas through food, laughter, literature, fitness, and more. Now, tonight, I am delighted to be here, and I'm also delighted to be joined by three people who have set up incredible communities in the wellness space. So on our panel this evening, we have Phil Hilton, host of the Manatomy podcast and former editor of Men's Health magazine.
Hiya. Thanks. That was completely accurate. Relax.
This guy.
And we also have Ryan Lanji, who is the founder of queer fitness initiative Not Dead Yet and winner of Netflix's The Big Flower Fight.
That's me.
Yes. And Tyler Williams-Green, who is the CEO and founder of the Outrunners.
Hey.
Hey. Now, tonight we're going to be chatting about the positive impact that wellness communities have and why they're important both online and offline. And we're also going to be touching on the changes that all of us are actually able to make when it becomes making these communities a thing and making them more diverse and inclusive for everybody. So I'm going to kick off with you, Phil.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, obviously, if you can tell us why you actually set up Manatomy and what it is that you're trying to achieve with it.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the co-host, actually. That was only slight inaccuracy in your introduction. Apart from that, it was flawless.
Thank
you. With my colleague, Danny Wallace. And Danny is a writer and broadcaster, and he wrote Yes Man, which was made into a movie with Jim Carrey, actually. Does anyone know Danny Wallace?
Oh my God, I love that film.
Oh, what a great response. Yeah, I love it too. It's any time.
Okay, great.
So it was to be completely frank, his idea. So we've been mates for a long time. And it was in lockdown, and we didn't know what to do with ourselves, really, because everything is shut down. And he's a million-selling 44-year-old writer and broadcaster, and I'm a 57-year-old, essentially washed-up magazine editor with nothing to live for. And he said, should we do a project together? And obviously, I was keen. And then we started thinking about topics, podcasting and a newsletter. And he suggested doing something where men talk honestly about their bodies, which is Manatomy, getting well-known men. He's got a lot of famous mates. And instantly that topic came up. We both felt hugely uncomfortable. We knew that the last thing we wanted to talk about publicly was our insecurities and our feelings about our physical appearance. And then I knew we were onto something. Because as a lifelong magazine editor, if there's discomfort, there's excitement and interest. So immediately home in on that one. So of the various ideas we entertained, and he also came up with the brilliant portmanteau punning title of Manatomy. And we had it then. And then it was kind of, we didn't know how the conversation was going to go. So what we didn't want to do was do something that was very, very mental health. We applaud those, but we wanted something that would also be kind of fun. We wanted the theme to come in wrapped in entertainment and laughter, because we had a primarily male audience in mind. And if you're going to talk to men, I think there ought to be laughter. And there is a whole genre of I've suffered this terrible thing and this is how it felt. And we do have darker moments, but it's all about light and shade. So the way the podcast has gone, and what I like about it is that we'll move across the hour or so that we do it, talking to guys, and they'll talk sometimes about some terrible issue, some addiction they've had, or some self-loathing moment in their teens, or they hate their legs, they're waiting for pubic hair to grow that never came, and all the things men never, ever talk about publicly. And then I'll have a tremendous laugh about a weird incident where their body has let them down publicly. I won't go into that one now. But we had
Triggered.
we had Gary Lineker on. He's probably our biggest guest, and he was fantastic. So I think there are very few appealing role models of older, well-known men in the public eye, and he's done okay. So there's loads of people in the club I'm in of sort of older guys who just seem to be appalling human beings and have used their power and their fame for nothing but discomfort, really. And often they're people who've made great movies or my favorite TV shows or great records, and you think, and you turn out to be that guy. So all we want to do is create a space where people who were decent, trying their best, not perfect, but decent, trying their best, so they could talk honestly about how they felt about their bodies, And people like Gary Lineker have been fantastic. So you're out there and you're thinking, well, he had insecurities. Look, he's got all that money and all that fame, and he's been top-level sportsman and one of the best-paid people at the BBC. And he's worried about himself and where it's all going, and had all those moments. And how inspiring is that when he shares that? And it's a conversation you never have unless you're 3 bottles of wine down with your closest friend normally.
Well, this is what I was going to ask, that, you know, if you feel that men are starting to be more open about their bodies and insecurities, and the importance, I could apply this to all of you as well, the importance of doing that. So you have well-known figures, like if it's sportsmen like Gary Lineker. I saw the one that you did with Chris Hoy as well. So it's like the cyclist in me is obviously going to be keen on that one. But it's just being very open and frank, the importance of that. And if you're seeing that more and more within the wellness movement.
I don't think there's been a body diversity movement the same way there has been for women. So I'm not seeing underwear, for example, advertised to men with people of varying shapes. It's still very much the ripped guy. I think hopefully we're on that journey. And as for talking about it outside of, because we create a frame of Manatomy where you can talk about it, whether people are sitting in pubs saying, I really like your neck, Gary, or Steve, I feel terrible about my skinny calves. I have my doubts as yet, but I hope it's coming. I don't know how anyone else feels.
Oh no, I'm a gay man. Of course, I've heard that.
I probably feel like I've, you know, especially things like social media, there's quite a lot of like body shaming around, you know, like there's loads of, I've seen these memes around, you know, this person's like skipped leg day or, you know, something like that. So I think it's definitely probably worked in the opposite.
Yeah,
or why it's become like a lot more worse.
But what needs to be applauded with what you're doing is that you're asking people who we all as society, as women or gay people or queer people, have always been like, you're top tier, you're like the highest point of the pyramid of privilege, so you've got it sorted. You're asking them to crumble. So we realize that we're not alone, and also that like they're not as strong as we thought, which is super important.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people in showbiz, as it turns out, are quite driven by demons. This is not news to the world, but when you speak to people who feel a huge urge to get out and perform in front of large groups of people are often doing so for mixed reasons. And as they've reached a point of success where they can talk honestly about that, it's really interesting to me as to what people, what drives people to achieve those very well-known positions.
Now, I have to touch upon this, obviously being, you know, the former editor of Men's Health magazine, just in regards to how men's magazines are and their history as well. So you had, like, you know, the time of the lads mag, so you would have had your Nuts and your Zoo and things like that out there. And I just remember when I was at college and university with guys that were reading those magazines, just that it feels like a whole different era now, the idea of magazines and publications like that and the kind of like messages that they were promoting. So I was wondering from your perspective, how have things changed since the 90s and those sort of like heydays of the lads mags, and, you know, in reflection of things like Men's Health magazine as well? Yeah,
so I was almost around the launch, I was almost the launch editor in the early phases of Men's Health. So it was, thinking back on it now, it was a very American magazine, that's one of the things. And also the 90s were a very, very different place culturally. And when it initially came over, the British staff did not want to run those big muscly guys on the cover. We fought it. We fought it almost to the point where it was a disciplinary issue. And if you Google the very first covers of Men's Health in the UK, they're wearing shirts and stuff. Because we said, no way British guys are going to buy those big dudes. And of course, when I did finally get around to trying it, when I caved to pressure from my American bosses who were not to be messed with, they were right and I was wrong. And it's absolutely sold like Billy O. It's fantastic. But what was the message there? What was going on? Because at the time, you didn't see anyone that looked like a Men's Health cover model in real life. And I went to the gym a lot. I never saw anyone who had the combination of really big muscles and really low body fat to get that six-pack. And I couldn't find any models at the time to shoot over here. So I had to go to Miami and shoot these guys. A proper American, the absolute peak of fitness modeling. And they were like no one I'd ever met before in my life. And you had that weird feeling of, what am I? They were kind of, in one sense, a symbol of an aesthetic that you aspire to that might get you to go to the gym or go running or something. But on the other hand, they were a really high bar to aim for. These guys had genetics, they had discipline, they had lighting, they had the best photographers in the world photographing them. So looking back, it was a slightly odd thing. But talking about how things have changed, what I didn't anticipate at that time, because it's quite hard to find a gym even then, in the 90s, was the proliferation of that kind of body through Instagram. So what appeared to be a very rare and unusual physical state, now there's millions of Instagram influencers with massive shoulders and ripped abs who've somehow managed that. And I think that can have quite a destructive effect because it gives everyone the feeling they're just not quite making it. And these people are out there, and they're on every street corner. I just never happen to see them. They're only on Instagram. Does that make sense?
No, it does, because it's, you know, the elements of what you get with social media, it can be like a double-edged sword, that it's positive in regards to the communities that you're all going to talk about that you've built, which is fantastic to connect with people. But there's also the element that social media can alienate you if you're not looking like that perfect sculpted body that you see, or the pressures that come with that as well. So I don't know if, like, you know, I know obviously it's different communities that the three of you have created, and I know I can talk from my own experiences in the cycling community, like maybe not looking like other top-notch athletes when they squeeze themselves into their Lycra. But it's just how do you work with those, I guess, the demons of social media, if that makes sense? Like when you're trying to encourage and grow those communities for them not to feed into that kind of messaging they're seeing online.
I feel like with some of the young people that we work with, we often just have to keep on reminding them that, you know, it's a lot of the images that they're seeing have either been edited or, you know, these are people where that's their job to look like that. So it's just kind of like just being quite open and honest with them about sort of like, you know, the reality of that, and having conversations with them around, you know, how should health make you feel? You know, it should make you feel good about yourself. It should make you feel like you've got more energy. It should help you sleep better, you know, and all of those things, and just kind of bringing it back to that. And I think, you know, with a lot of our runners for our adult running club that we have, you know, we always try and pitch it around not trying to get a PB. It's like, you know, if you've done that 10K or that 5K or that half marathon, just applaud yourself for doing it, and just kind of taking it out of that kind of like competitive zone as much as possible.
I feel like the algorithm is designed to make us feel like the minority, and as you learn and as you engage with your community, you realize that you're actually the majority. And what we do, is, from what I've seen, the blueprint of influencerism is that, like 5 years ago, it was really bold for someone to like put a picture of themselves naked, being a neo-activist, being like, you know what, I actually love my body, or like, here, I'm not going to get rid of my body hair. And like at first I was like, all y'all bitches just want to be famous. But the truth is, though, they were unlocking an entire community of people who felt the same way as them, and they were using bravery, courage, and like putting their head above the parapet to really actually like make other people realize that they're not alone. And so I think with every endeavor that we go through, it's important that we have people show up truthfully, honestly, and not have them be a part of this weird rigmarole of having to conform to some sort of cis, white, straight society of Hollywood, body imagery and fitness. It just shouldn't exist anymore. It needs to be killed at all costs.
Now, Ryan, I'm gonna hop to you and ask you, just as you've ended on that point, if you can talk to us about why you actually set up Not Dead Yet and what it is that you're trying to achieve.
I'm just trying to stay alive. Basically, I'll give you the Twitter version. So I'm a polymath. I don't know what I do, but I've done it for 10 years, and I'm really blessed to be where I am now. I started working in fashion and art, and I was really bored with both of them. Fashion parties are so boring. You just get drunk and then end up going home crying. Maybe it's just me. Art parties, everyone's wearing turtlenecks and talking about Tracy Emin and YBAs, and at the end of it, you're like going home crying. Maybe it's just me. And I did that for 10 years, and then I got really disenfranchised with the queer community, because when I was with them, they were like, oh, you're so ethnic and beautiful, but no one wanted to know what I do or who I am. Didn't live in fashion, didn't live in art, so I felt like displaced all the time. Also, I don't sound like I'm from here, I don't look like I'm from here. So I was just like, fuck it. I'm gonna throw a Bollywood hip hop night at my favorite gay bar and just play all my favorite music. I didn't even know how to DJ. I just did it on YouTube and Spotify. And I was like, I'll use all of my know-how in fashion and art to get the message out there. Within 2 years, like, we went from 6 brown people in a white pub to 300 brown people in a space that was for us. And Hungama is my night, and it's a mashup of Bollywood, hip hop, and club music. And it's like we've played around the world now, and we've built DJs, photographers, artists, actors, poets, filmmakers through this night because I just had this like infrastructure of Studio 54. I was like so obsessed with it when I was a kid. I was like, if you bring creatives together, make them feel important, make them feel like they're seen, you can create a movement. Then we had the pandemic. So we lost my pride and joy and my sense of home in this city, and it was devastating. But I was lucky that when I was younger, I basically started working at gyms. Like I didn't work at bars or restaurants because I think when you do that, you drink a lot more. Also, you end up indulging in recreational things that you shouldn't be because you're just like, oh, we'll never make it. I don't know how to start. It's just a hobby. It'll always just be a hobby. So I started working at a gym, and I was like, the only thing I want to work on is my vessel. And I was fortunate enough to work with ex-Olympians and incredible personal trainers who, even though I handed out towels, would let me slot in at a gap and train me and how to move my body. During the pandemic, I was fortunate enough to be on this Netflix show and win. I wasn't a florist. I just went on to show people that you can be creative and get far. I won, which is cute. But that came out during the pandemic, and I didn't know there was so much uncertainty with my career as a reality show star, as a DJ, as a fashion art curator. All of that was gone, and the only thing I knew how to do was work on my body. So I started doing it. I got a phone call from this guy who was like, oh, I just see that you're like Instagramming fitness and stuff, and you've done all these things, and I saw you on a podcast. We have a business that is crippling right now because of the fact that it was a traveling business, and we want you to creatively consult on it. So I went in and I was like, cool, like, I'll help you. Don't know why you want to do a traveling business right now. And then I read about it, and it was about like getting white gay men to group buy and book houses and accommodation around the world. And it's like Facebook, so you get notifications that people are doing it. And I was like, girl, this needs to stop. Why are you sending white gay men across the world? Like, we're in a pandemic, and also it doesn't need to happen. Like, stop gentrifying the whole world. And then he was like, so what's your idea? And I was like, I don't know, I just need to hang out with you and I'll get an idea. Every odd Friday, he'd go to a gym with all of his gay white friends, and they would do a queer jack, where they'd like take over a gym class and make it queer. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll come. So I went, and I was like, oh my God, I'm again the only brown person. Everyone's looking at me, I'm covered in tattoos, they don't know where I'm from, I have to tell them who I am, and then they care. And I was like, this is the business. And so we started it, and he was like, what do you want to call it? And I was like, I don't know, let's call it Not Dead Yet. He's like, what is it? I was like, oh, I don't know, I just really think that there's a way we can get non-binary, trans, and people of color in a space. And he's like, why? And I was like, have you looked at these gyms? I was like, these are premium gyms with the best body wash, the best body lotion, like, scan your phone to get a membership, like, your towel is so fluffy and nice. It's like, my brown and black brothers and sisters and gender non-conforming creatures will never be able to be in this space, and I'm going to give them that space. So what I did was I went to these gyms and said, y'all homophobic. And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, y'all transphobic. And like, what do you mean? I was like, you don't know how to fix this, so let me fix it for you. I was like, I fortunately have made a intentional space called Hungama, which is for queer brown bodies. And I've aligned myself with all these amazing nights like Pussy Palace and Inferno and Harpies and these queer club nights that are literally the beating artery of culture right now. I was like, I know all the DJs. How about we take these classes and pop in those DJs? And how about we take these gyms and make the gym spaces gender neutral? And how about no one in the office can tell me what to do because it's my space when I'm there for that hour and a half, and I'll take care of my people. And so that's how NDY started, and it's called Not Dead Yet. We started it, but then we went into lockdown 2. So as soon as we were about to hit our classes, I was like, oh my God, we're back in lockdown. And then I realized that all of this care and consideration for these people, these different shapes and forms of our gender spectrum, were in their rooms, again, suffering. So I invested money into getting all these coaches to host online classes. And I just started an Instagram, and it was like, you don't need to pay, you just need to show up, you can keep your camera off. We'll make sure the coaches are not giving you gender dysphoria. We'll make sure the coaches are people of color, so you're not looking at white Stacy while she's telling you to do more Pilates. And after 6 weeks, we had 2,500 people around the world log into these Zooms. And one of the most incredible moments was that we did a weightlifting class at home where you could use any object in your house with British Sign Language. And when I saw 20 people who were not able to hear on Zoom during the pandemic, I was like, gym spaces are outdated. So lockdown's now ended, and we're in our 3rd season of NDY. Actually, you were part of the 1st season as well.
Yeah, the running aspect.
Yeah, Tyler was incredible. He did this thing where his first challenge was to get people to run to their favorite queer venue and take a picture to raise awareness for a venue that's been shut and run back home. And then the next week was another challenge, and it was incredible. It was really lovely. And we're just galvanizing and engaging non-binary trans people of color to know that they're safe with us when they come with NDY, and we're going to go take over these spaces, and we're going to start to subvert the gym space. That's it.
Down the gyms.
Yeah.
Well, no, you've touched upon some points that I wanted to talk about as well, just in regards to, we have to say it, like with the wellness community, there are levels of inaccessibility to it.
Completely.
So there are so many barriers to entry that maybe some folks don't think exist with it.
Let's just use the example of being a trans woman or a trans man. When you walk into a gym space, you obviously are taking different sort of hormones in order to create the gender euphoria that you deserve, well and rightly so. But when you walk into these spaces, you're immediately hit with male or female. Once you go into these spaces, you cannot be seen in a changing room like putting on a binder. You cannot be seen in a changing room and then not be a spectacle. It's like, but how do we educate and re-educate these spaces to be more gender neutral? And also, gender affirming. So like when you walk in, instead of being like, hey guys, or hi ladies, or hey ma'am, it's like, why can't you use gender non-conforming, gender neutral words? And like, so this is like an unlearning that all the gyms have to go through. We put all the coaches through rigorous relearning. And the gym spaces are just so here for it because they're too scared to touch it. It's a third rail issue for them.
Now, I was going to ask you, you've kind of talked about it as well, the biggest challenges for the LGBTQIA plus community that they face in wellness, because it's just like because we were touching upon as well, just the inaccessibility that does exist within it as well, quite blinkered views as to what wellness is. And I wanted to touch upon something, like I was doing my crib notes and research, but you'd done an interview where you had talked about like the importance of like taking up space, but creating space at the same time as well, because you can't necessarily wait for some of these like, you know, well-known wellness brands or like, you know, the marketing around it to suddenly just fall in line and be like, oh, okay, well, we need to do the thing. It's activism. You need to do the thing yourself.
Yeah.
But then on top of that as well, another thing that you said about wellness that I really liked was just sometimes it's the act of keeping still is what gets focused on instead of using that energy that you have got. So, you know, you talked about if it's like just meditation, or you said something about like meditation or just burning sage or something, instead of actually just using the power of your body and the power of movement for wellness in itself, and like even unleashing anger just to get that energy out of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, everything's cathartic in a way. It's cathartic to be still, it's cathartic to be moving. But I think what's really important is that I was saying this to you all earlier, is that like we haven't had role models. Most of them died during the AIDS epidemic. So I'm in my mid-30s, even though I look really young. And I'm like, I need to be a role model for these kids. Like, they don't know that they deserve that space, and they don't know that they deserve to work on their vessels. They don't know what it looks like to see a queer person who's nourished their body. Because the only thing we see on television is those who were liberated and then died of AIDS. And so I'm like, that's why Not Dead Yet exists. Like, we're not dead yet, and we didn't die. This is not our first pandemic, it's our second one. And we are going to work as hard as we can to turn the tables on these spaces. And when we go in with kindness, love, unity, and togetherness, are going to show people that we can exist with you, and we're way more fun. Come on, have you been to a non-binary strip club spin class? Have you been to an immersive visual Bollywood yoga class? Have you been to Pussy Palace weightlifting? Sickening. That's all happening this month, by the way, so get your tickets. Get your tickets.
Good month.
Yeah. It's just, it's wonderful to see and to be able to discuss these different elements that exist in wellness, because it can be quite sterile, and it can be very focused on a particular audience or a particular demographic who have got their money to spend and are ready to throw their money at it, if it's the athleisure wear, the spaces that you're talking about that seem to be available for the privileged few. Now, this is where I want to cross over with you, Tyler, as well, because I know there's been crossover between the two of you with what you've created individually, but it would be brilliant to hear about why you set up Outrunners and what you're trying to achieve with that community.
Yeah, so I basically started going to a running club, which I know that you know of, called Run Them Crew, which is set up by the amazing Charlie Dark, who, you know, from Run Them, there's been so many amazing kind of like splinter running groups that have kind of like taken off that all have like different aims and objectives, which were like amazing. And from going there, you know, I definitely felt like I was part of a community, and I actually became a coach, and I started training some friends for the London Marathon. And then I just got to a point where I decided to set up my own running club, so I set up the Outrunners, and it literally started off with just a few friends that I was kind of running around Victoria Park. And one of the things that I found was that a lot of my runners that came to that running club were young professionals that lived in Hackney that felt like they were very much a part of the problem, especially when we talk about gentrification and moving into an area and not necessarily giving anything back to nurture that area. So we started doing a few one-off kind of like community runs where we'd run like a food parcel to a homeless shelter and stuff like that. But I come from a very much like a youth work background, like working with young people with varying needs, from mental health needs to young people that are, you know, sort of on the verge of exclusion from school. And one of the things that I found was that actually you're going to have more of an impact if you do something that's more embedded into that area. And, you know, from my experience in working with young people, there were a few things that I felt were really needed. One of those was career progression and young people having access to various careers. You know, we take for granted that if you're a young person, you know, a young person from Hackney, that you'll know an architect to ask, you know, how do I become an architect? Another one was school exclusion, and, you know, having a consistent, positive sort of role model that you could kind of connect with on a weekly basis. And the other one was getting out and getting active. So we basically decided to pivot the running club to be able to deliver free youth programs which focused on all of those various things, basically.
Oh.
Yeah, so we've got a career program called Run Your Career, where we take over a venue across Hackney, and we get loads of different companies and professionals to come and talk to the young people about the different career pathways and how to get onto them. And then we set up a mentoring program which works with young people who are in the last year of primary school, because we all know that if you're struggling in the last year of primary school, when you transition into secondary school, you're going to be fucking like lost. You're going to, you know, you're moving to a bigger school, you're not going to know all the same teachers that have the same connections with you, so you're really going to struggle. And we've got 4 youth running clubs which are basically spread out across Hackney, and all of those programs are basically facilitated, and we get all of our volunteers, the majority of them, from the running club.
Because this is incredible, like obviously focusing on youth and wellness from a very early age, but accessible wellness from an early age too. Because I know when, like, I'm from East London, grew up in East London, still live in East London, those kind of things didn't exist. Like I'm hurtling towards my 40s at the moment, and I remember what it was like growing up. Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
Lies.
But it's that whole thing of when I was growing up in my patch of East London, we didn't have things like that going on. I mean, the most I can think of, seriously, is PE. That was it. It was just like your PE, and that was part and parcel of what it is that you were doing at school. But there was never anyone, either like the groups that existed or people coming into the schools to check for you, do you know what I mean? And just like get you at that point.
Definitely, and I think, you know, with all of, you know, sort of, you know, with austerity cuts and stuff like that, a lot of the youth clubs and youth programs have been cut. You know, they've been completely decimated across London. So, you know, what we offer with our youth running clubs, for instance, is just like a safe space where the kids can come together, you know, once a week, and they've got our volunteers who are getting them into running through fun. You know, we've got 3 youth running clubs that are aimed at, you know, 8 to 13-year-olds, and that's literally just through play. So they do things like Stuck in the Mud, or we'll do like a scavenger hunt or something like that with them. And then we've got one that's sort of aimed 13 to 18, which is a little bit, you know, we've had to kind of partner with sort of like fitness brands and stuff like that, because that age just kind of needs something slightly cooler. So the kids are just like, you know, we want this, and it's like, but you know, I
same
think,
thing as well.
but yeah, I think when we talk about, you know, especially running and accessibility, you have like a race like the Hackney Half, which is like quite a well-known race in Hackney, but it's like a lot of the families which live in Hackney, they're not going to pay like 60 quid to run around their own streets if you're from a low-income family. It's like,
I'm laughing because I did the 5K, and then I thought I did the Hackney Half, and I was like, going around with my medal, and I was like, yeah, I just did the half, and everyone was like, what? You're crazy. That was a 5K.
It was the same medal though. I think they actually used the same medal.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah, so
then
you
I'm
can just
winning.
claim it. Pretty much.
Yeah,
Just
hard.
what you touched upon about actually working within the communities and having, you know, the role models or people that the communities can look to who they can see themselves in and recognise themselves in is important as well.
Yes, that's super important.
Yeah, it's just that it's lost because, you know, it's like I was at an event at TFL where we were talking about it was an inclusion and diversity report, and TFL and British Cycling were looking for ways to be able to get more people cycling, how they can do that and what have you. And I know I got pretty frank in the conversations about it, because there's a big difference between already knowing that you have role models or people within those communities that can already do that work and reach the people in those communities, the youth, as opposed to some stuffy white guy in a suit, or someone like, you know, dressed head to toe in clothing from British Cycling to come and talk to you. You can't identify and you can't relate to that person.
No, you can't. And I think it's definitely about having a space that you feel is built, you know, for you. You know, I would say our Tuesday Run Club, which is the one which was initially set up, you know, I'd always kind of think to myself, you know, the runners that we're getting are predominantly sort of middle-class white people who just like love to run, which is completely fine. But, you know, in terms of like diversifying that club, you know, you really have to be in it for the long game. So that's why we created our youth running clubs. So there's a youth running club for a young person to go to. So when they, you know, when they're like 19, 20, they can just then transition into our adult Tuesday group. And also, you know, the group that we have on a Monday, we really, you know, we did a lot of work with working with young women of colour to help design that programme. So we literally were like, what would stop you from coming? What would make you come? A lot of it was like free clothes. It's like, okay, well, we'll just have to go there. But, you know, just making sure, you know, it's just
problem.
yeah, it's just things like, you know, we made sure that we had, you know, somebody who identified as a female coach to basically sit down with them at the beginning and ask if they needed sports bras. And then we, you know, we went away to brands and were like, you know, can you support us in making sure that they have adequate equipment to be able to come and, you know, have a positive experience within that group, because obviously there's a lot of data to show that young women, when they hit puberty, they fall out of exercise because their bodies are changing, and you know, a lot of the time they can be sexualized in PE classes and stuff like that. So, you know, it was just about creating a safe space that gives them a positive experience in their teenage years, in the hope that they'll then start coming to our Tuesday group and help diversifying running at a kind of older age.
No, this is obviously a beautiful theme that's running through all of the communities that the three of you have created as well, like having the safe space, having someone that you can recognise yourself in, having someone you feel comfortable speaking to. I know, like just from my own experiences with the community building that I've done in cycling, I helped co-found the Women of Colour Cycling Collective, just because, as I've said before, cycling can be a very sort of predominantly male, pale and stale space, and it can be quite unwelcoming in that sense too. So it's just being able to create these communities and places for people to feel safe to go to is important. I was going to ask as well, I mean, we've kind of touched upon it, but maybe even for all three of you, with the podcasting, the newsletter, obviously with what you've got going on with Not Dead Yet, with what you have going on with the Outrunners as well, what were the challenges that you may have faced in building your communities? Like if there was any pushback from folks, because I know I'm going to kick it off with saying, I've had people say to me, it's very divisive starting up a group for women of colour in cycling. Cycling is for everybody. And it's like, that's when you can't see beyond the, it's for everybody, then there is a problem. And also the hashtag outside is free really annoys me as well, because outside for activities isn't necessarily free if we're talking about the equipment that you need, all the clothing and stuff like that. So I just wondered if the three of you had experienced challenges with creating your communities that you have.
My challenges always exist with white people. Like they think that they have it all figured out, and like it just really does my head in, and it's like it's such a lack of sensitivity. Sorry.
No, I'm deeply insensitive. I deserve it.
No, you don't. You're here with me now on this panel, so you're an ally. But it's a situation where I'm just like, it's not. I'm not trying to be like whatever y'all want to call it. It's just one of those things where I'm like, to be able to live your life and think that your life is achievable at just with dedication, tenacity, and discipline is such a fool's errand. It's like you don't realize how we've been brought up. We don't realize how many times we've been told we can't. How many times that our dreams have been squashed because our parents are just trying to get us to survive. And like when we go to these gym spaces, because you know what, actually I'm going to focus on myself. You're in a room doing downward dog with a whole bunch of white Beckys, and you're just like, they're all having fun talking about what they're going to do tomorrow, and you're like, I actually don't have any friends right now who want to have a sober day life with me. So like that struggle is so real. Like we have to congregate on the dance floor. We have to we have to feel our pain and get rid of our pain on the dance floor that is in such close proximity to alcohol, such close proximity to drugs, such close proximity to danger. And I was like, I haven't seen a queer community that exists in the daylight. And so that is why NDY is really important. And I know that there are things that are queer in the daytime, but how much life drawing can you do? How much open mic can you do? How much art gallery hopping can you do? It's like we need to start existing and being more visible. And to be honest, like it's our visibility that allows you the opportunity to be like, hey, maybe white men should talk about how they feel about their bodies, because
Absolutely.
we're doing enough of that work.
Yeah.
And you are doing an incredible job right now, actually getting the youth to get outside and run, because getting them to run is so difficult. I can barely do it.
I got you out running though. When,
Yeah. Then I saw you in the park and you're like, why are you walking? But it's like, I think what we need to do is get more people like us collaborating with each other. Because if we do that, the other people can see that like we are all on the same level, and that's how they get involved. So right now, with the success that I have and being on reality television and working on a new BBC Three show, I didn't want to be selling someone some sort of EE phone or like telling someone to like buy a Sky television when I start getting my partnership deals. I want people to come to NDY, because if you see me, I exist, and if you want to see how I got here, it's in one of those classes. And so I want you on that bike beside me, on that mat beside me, or lifting those weights, because I was at a point where I didn't think I could lift that weight as well. And so that's why it needs to exist. And that's the galvanization. That wasn't the question, was it?
No, but it was part of the question, because this all feeds into it. It's the challenges, and then how you end up busting the challenges or busting down.
Well, it's just,
down
I guess for me,
barriers.
it's just the passion of like, it takes a lot of emotional labor to have to like stand and help someone realize why they're wrong. And like, I don't get paid for it all the time, and I do it quite often. And so it's a situation now where I'm like, it just needs to happen, because we just can't have more kids turning to the bottle, turning to suicide, turning to depression. It's like the chemicals in our bodies can balance us out if we activate our bodies in the right way. And it is not just for a certain premium level of society. It is for everyone. And it doesn't matter what kind of outfit you're wearing. It doesn't matter like how many likes you have on Instagram. It's how much you love yourself, and how many people you can find around you who love themselves as equally, and that creates a community.
So Phil, I want to pull you in on this one with what you and Danny have created with Manatomy, and obviously with Assembly, the newsletter that you do as well, the spaces that you've created within that. And just touching upon what Ryan was saying about discussing elements of mental health and the vulnerability as well. Is there something, I mean, just within the wellness community and with men being able to express that, have you found that that's now something that's been kind of opened up with what it is that you've created with the podcast and the newsletter?
I suppose speaking for myself, it's been a journey of trying to become friendly with the idea of vulnerability. So one of the things, we really tackle it from I suppose, a heterosexual male point of view on the whole. We've had many gay guests, but the thing of being male and trying to appear strong and in control at all times. And even though part of my brain's going, just chill out, this is fine, the other part of me wants to play that part. And I was remembering a situation where I was in a working place where I was having a difficult time, and a colleague who was alongside me texted me at the end of the day and said, that looked kind of tough. And I wrote the text going, I'm across this, I've got this. And then I had to delete that text and go, actually, I'm kind of shattered, and I'm really sad and angry, and I feel really weird. And that opened it up. But it was a lifetime of training to be, people who look like me do not behave in a vulnerable way in public. And all the conversations we're having in Manatomy are like people just going, I'm going to admit to, I hated my nipples when I was 15, and I didn't want to take my shirt off, and it felt awful. And hearing men talk about that has been really helpful to me in navigating my own journey with masculinity, really.
That's fantastic.
Sorry, I was going to cut you. I realised you could say something as well. Sorry.
No, it wasn't. I was just...
Yeah. No, because it's just, as we were saying, what about examples of brands that are out there that are doing it right? Now, I'm I'm biased because I'm very impressed, obviously, blown away with what the three of you are creating and doing. And you're clearly doing it right, because it's very different from just the stereotypical wellness messages and stuff that are out there. But can any of you think of brands out there that are actually doing it right, or at least moving in the right direction towards like shaking it up?
I know a brand that has done it right, but it's because I creatively directed it.
Speak on it.
So, Benefit Cosmetics, the kings and queens of eyebrows, came to me and they're like, we need to do a Pride activation. And I was like, great, what is it? Like, what do you want to sell? And they're like, we want to get everyone to paint their eyebrows like in rainbow colors, because rainbows were like a thing on Instagram. And I was like, God, are you joking? And they're like, why? I was like, you put rainbows on our buildings, you put rainbows everywhere. That's rainbow washing. Why are you asking me to rainbow wash my eyebrows? And I was like, I can do it, but we need to give it complete and utter gravitas and importance. And like, they had words with their head office and their global teams, and they were like, okay, cool. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, we'll give you whatever you need, and you have complete creative control. And I realized, I mean, we did it. It's on my Instagram. It's on Benefit's Instagram. It's incredible. It's like a really cute sort of comedic, tongue-in-cheek way of reminding you that when you put a rainbow on and when you come to Pride, who are you representing? Do you know what those colors stand for, and do you know who those people are? And so it is like a crash course in the coolest activists, and I don't want to call them activists, them existing as a radical activist, like this position. Just the movers and shakers of the East London and London community. And it's an extremely diverse lineup. But the beautiful thing was the company and the corporation that is Benefit said yes. They were like, okay, we don't understand what's going on, and we're going to give it to you to do it. And they never once held my arms behind my hands behind my back. They never told me I couldn't. They were like, you have complete creative control. We had a set that was full of queer, non-binary, and trans people. Our lineup was extremely diverse. We had three queer Pan-Asians on a lineup of 10. Like, that just doesn't happen. And like, the entire queer community was just like, who did this? And it's because I had the courage to be like, y'all gonna get it wrong, so I need complete creative control. And like, most brands are tokenizing us regularly, putting one person in a wheelchair on a lineup, putting one person who's black on a lineup, one person who's brown, who might be half brown and Japanese on a lineup, because that's 2 ticks in one box. It's like, squash it, I'm so over it. And so they all need to learn.
Have you come across any brands that you feel are doing it right or moving in the right direction?
I mean, unfortunately, I've probably worked more with brands that I think can probably do something to improve. But we have, don't want to name any names. But we have, recently started working with a brand that I have enjoyed working with, because they're not looking for praise for supporting us, in terms of, they donated like lots of trainers that we could give to our young people, for instance. So if a young person, like having the equipment isn't a barrier, and they haven't really asked, for us to do any posts or anything like that for it, which is, okay, so you can see that the person that I spoke to actually has like a real vested interest in, giving more access to young people. But I would probably say, in all honesty, it's probably the other way around with working with brands sort of in the past. I don't think
Not even one
of them. I just feel like the times that we have, a lot of the time they've missed the mark in terms of understanding actually what community engagement is. There's been lots of conversations that I've had with some brands about, we need to, can you do something to like ignite the youth running club or expand it in our initial stages? I'm not going to name the brand, but I was like, but we do have, quite a lot of children who, some of them have got behavioural issues, so you can't just like massively grow a youth running club until you have all of those things sorted out.
Yeah.
And I just, I just generally feel like with brands, from my experience, there's been like a slight lack of understanding in how to engage community groups, and a lot of tokenism in terms of like, if you use a certain amount of influencers of colour, that means that you're in the community, that you're doing work in the community. It doesn't. It just means that you're basically highlighting a few people that are, you just got to kind of...
What about you, Phil?
Well, I work for brands, and I've been a corporate creature most of my career, and I say use it. I welcome multinational companies trying to look as though they're doing the right thing. They're going to get it wrong. Some of them are just going to be doing it without any real intention, and they're not going to be following up on their promises. But every time they do that, they're making a stick for themselves. And if you pick up that stick on social media and beat them with it, someone in a boardroom somewhere is going to go, well, we've got to fix this. We put that press release out 2 months ago. We don't fix this. We're going to look bad. And that's a real opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
So I say bring it all on, but keep your eyes open.
Yeah. That's how I've felt with it as well. Like in my 11 years of being in cycling, that there are going to be some folks that do get it dangerously wrong, but make the effort. It's the fact that if you, like you said, you stick your head above the parapet and you acknowledge that there is an issue, there is a problem, your views are very blinkered, what you're doing is not particularly inclusive, you need to do something about it, as opposed to just remaining with the status quo and just being like, well, we have our captive audience, we know who we're selling to, we're making our money, then we're okay. So, yeah. And for brands and marketing companies as well to accept, like, you know, I've talked about this a lot, like getting people to have seats at the table. Sometimes it's past the point of seats at the table, and like what you are doing, you're creating your own communities and creating your own movements with that. And I think this is a nice thing that I kind of want to wrap this up on as well, in regards to your tips for creating those kind of communities. You know, like for all of us out here, like one of the things I like to say is no matter how big or small it is, every single one of us has a platform. Every single one of us has a voice, and we are able to use it for the greater good. So the fact that if you have a small social media following or a large one, it doesn't matter. It's still a platform. It is your space to be able to do something and make a difference. So I was wondering, like, you've all would have started off at the bottom of what it is that you're doing, and you're working your way to something incredible. So what would be your words of wisdom that you would impart to people out there thinking of starting a movement or starting their communities?
Yeah, it's actually funny you asked that, because I've actually been offering advice to another running club that kind of wants to pivot itself to doing some community work and becoming a charity. And the 2 bits of advice that I've given to them so far is consistency. So it's like, you know, make sure that you show up weekly. So, you know, I remember when I initially set up the running club, there were some days that there was like one person. But it's like, you know, if you're consistently there and everybody knows that you're going to be there weekly, then I think that's, you know, that's one of the like sort of most important things. And also looking at the community that you have to support you, because you can't do everything yourself. And it's kind of like, you know, meet with people that have like a similar outlook or want to, you know, solve a similar societal issue that you have, and work with them collectively, so you're not just like taking everything on your own.
I would say to send the word ally to the mortuary, because if you look at that word and break it down in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it means that you are supporting a charitable cause and something that needs support. But what we actually need is like more of a coalition. Like when you go to the gym, come to an NDY class, buy a ticket that's 20 quid so it gets someone of color who's disproportionately affected economically a free ticket. Support independent businesses, support queer businesses. Every single choice you make, everything you buy, everything you like, and everything you do in your life can help us be more visible. And so, just do it. Nike.
I'd say get to know your audience. Become obsessed with the group that you're aiming at, and in painful detail, and spend loads of time on that. Because I remember hearing Charlie Dark speaking from Rundem Crew. And he had this observation that the people he was hoping to get out onto the streets really liked the social aspect, because often their homes were very small and they couldn't get people around a table to entertain them because they didn't have the space. That would never occur to me. I've got a number of tables. That's part of my privilege. I can have people around whenever I like. But he knew the target audience in that kind of detail, and everything I've ever done, it's when do they get up? What do they wash themselves with? What do they do? What clothes are they wearing? What their favourite telly programmes? Inside out, and then you can start shaping it rather than turning the camera always on yourself. Does that help?
I think that's a really beautiful note to wrap this up on as well. So, Phil, Ryan, Tyler, thank you so much for being part of this incredible panel, and thank you all for coming and listening to us talk about this. And I hope some wonderful pearls of wisdom in regards to what you can do for improving and diversifying the wellness community have been imparted onto you. So thank you so much. I don't know.